everybody, it's Romania Black. We are on episode 5 of Neon Genesis Evangelion, and last episode was pretty introspective. We got to see a lot of Shinji's inner thoughts of what Shinji's mental state is. It's not great, but I really am enjoying this series a lot because it's very psychological. It's very much a psychological thriller, just as much as it is a sci-fi action-oriented series. And I like that slowly but surely, Shinji, he was fighting in episode 1 for Rey, who was somebody he didn't know, but just was somebody that was about to die that he felt the need to protect. And now he has Toji and Ida. So, talking with a lot of people in the Discord and in the comments and things, I'm just now, episode 1 and 2 has been on YouTube, but everybody's comments with episode 1 was, have fun. I was like, oh my God, everybody had the same reaction. They're like, oh, you've never watched this series before. I was like, oh, fun times. And now that I'm on episode 5, with episodes 3 and 4 have been really good. Episode 3 is probably my favorite at this point. I like episode 3 a lot. And episode 4 was really good for that, for the reason of, I like the idea of, I think it might have been Maya B talking about this, but that in episode 1, Shinji kept repeating the phrase, I mustn't run away. And in that scenario, Maya B pointed out that phrase was told to him as an order, don't run away. And so he doesn't. But in the case of episode 3, he repeats the phrase, I mustn't run away, but he's disobeying orders and doing it. And so it's like Shinji is very fixated on this I mustn't run away thing. And it's also it's been pointed out in the Discord in the comments that Shinji is a very introverted and quiet character that seems very passive and wants to avoid violence. But in episode 3, he lashes out and has a moment where he just has all this freak out frustration. And it's like, where did that come from? And so it was also pointed out, and I didn't notice this as well, that in the first episode, there is the note that his father sent Shinji, that Gendo sent. And in that note, it shows that it's been all taped back together, which I didn't even put 2 and 2 together, means that Shinji tore it up. He got mad and he tore up the letter, and then he pieced it all back together. There are moments where Shinji has these freakouts, this burst of anger, that seems to come out of nowhere, especially considering the rest of his character. So again, I feel like Gendo knows things that he's not telling us. I feel like there's characters in this show that know things that we don't know yet as the audience. And there's lots of symbolism. There's lots of different imagery that has very, weighted emotions and things tied to it. So I'm just very curious to see. We went on a journey with Shinji in the last episode to see where he is mentally and to see him come together and decide. He had decided to quit NERV and leave. And then he realized he was leaving his friends and he regretted it. And at the very end, it shows that Misato is bringing him back into the fold, it seems. So he had his moment of rebellion. He ran away. And now he mustn't run away and he's come back. So we'll see how that goes. But I'm pretty excited to dive into this 5th episode and see what happens. So let's do this, shall we? We're going to start episode 5 of Neon Genesis Evangelion. And we're going to start that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. I've seen some pretty crazy cliffhangers, but this show kind of takes the cake, right? Just how could we just have this build up this entire episode, and then we get to him going to the battle and it just fires a laser through his chest and we get this horrified look of Shinji and then we just end? What? This episode, very interesting. We get to know a little bit more about Rey. Okay. All right. So this, I've said it a few episodes back, but this story is the weirdest. It's the weirdest post-apocalyptic sci-fi coming of age story for Shinji, because Shinji is our 14-year-old protagonist, and is 14-year-olds, you're in the prime age of puberty starting. There's all these hormones and emotions and it's crazy and you're starting to see people in different ways for the first time possibly, and so it's all relatively new. And I do appreciate this show doesn't gloss over things. It describes I know these middle school boys, I've substitute taught them before. I know exactly what the scenario is. But it's interesting. But Rey is a different cut, right? She's a cut above the rest. She seems a lot more mature on the outset than I think she actually is. I think she is just a 14-year-old girl. And there's some interesting things being set up here, but her and Gendo, okay. We're gonna have like a little three-way diagram here to talk about Gendo. Talk about Gendo. We're gonna talk about Rey, and we're gonna talk about Shinji. All right. Because I was debating on whether or not to bring Whiteboard Kun out, because there's not a lot of like world building or analysis stuff. It's more character building in this episode and setting up the characters. I'll be honest, we're 5 episodes into this series. I thought going into Neon Genesis Evangelion that by episodes 3 and 4, Shinji would be in some kind of academy and have like all these other pilots with him, and they'd all be like, best friends, bonding, camaraderie, nakama, all that. No, that's not what's happening at all. Like, Rey wants nothing to do with him because she thinks he's a coward, and it's fascinating. Like, this show is not going at all the direction I thought it was starting at. I thought by this point Shinji would have like a whole crew, a team assembled, and they would go fight the monsters together in their mechs, and that's not happening. So I'm curious to know this third girl, the girl in the red, when she comes in, how that's going to throw off the dynamic, because Rey and Shinji, there's not much there, and we're going to talk about that. But this opening, I love it. So get past the opening here. Get a lot more with Misato here. Okay. So we cut to Test Facility 2 in this episode, and we cut to Test Facility 2 22 days earlier. I find that funny. So I'm going to put over here that we tied to 22. So 22 days prior, nearly a month ago, 22 days ago, we have Rey was injured. Yeah, so we don't get a lot of world building in this episode, but what we do get, excuse me? Rey is injured. Hold on. Rey is injured, and it's not from an angel attack like I thought. That's not what injured her. Her injuries are from her ejecting from her EVA unit that continues to function without her. Hold on. I'm a little bit concerned. Concerns are here. So yeah, let's talk about Rey injured 22 days prior. And the first thing we see is Gendo pushing up the glass and saying commence activation. All right. And like his experiment, getting ready that stuff's going to go on. And I love that you see all the different connections, all the different like nerve ending connections that's showing up on the glasses, the lens. Very, very interesting. So her EVA unit is orange and has a very different looking head. It doesn't have the same mouth structure that Shinji's does. It doesn't look quite as humanoid as Shinji's. There's something else lacking with it. And it looks more mechanical because it has like all the different like light up things, and the mechanical armor and stuff is different. It's definitely the earlier prototype, you can tell. And it seems to have like a singular eye, and it looks back towards Gendo. Okay. And then it doesn't quite go through the borderline. It can't make the connection. And that's when the EVA unit goes crazy. The spinal cord prototype 0. I'm trying to like read all the little fine print in this because this episode, it's so dense. I like this brunette girl. This brunette girl that like sits in the cockpit. Her job is mainly to talk about how nothing's connecting and they've lost signal. Like that's like she's the bearer of bad news. She is the unfortunate messenger in all of this. The signal's not received. Yeah, and it's just freaking out. This EVA unit is, and it tears away from its restraints. So these EVAs have a consciousness, right? It has a consciousness. It acts on its own. When they unplug the power from it, and it's grabbing its head like something's not right. It's grabbing its head like something mentally isn't functioning properly with it. And it's like it has a headache or something. And oh my gosh, that image of Gendo standing there and it smashes it. So also, it tries to smash the window where Gendo is. And I don't know if that is deliberate, like it is trying to get to Gendo, or if it just Gendo happened to be standing there where it was smashing the window. If it was intentionally aiming for Gendo to attack him, or if it was just trying to smash the window. Just to get out. I don't know, but it's funny that it's aiming right at it. And Gendo doesn't leave. And then even when Akagi's like, get back, he doesn't move. And there's the auto ejection. And he says no because he sees the writing on the wall. There's no place for it to eject to. It's just going to fly around and hit the walls and everything and crash down with her in it. And she falls and he's like, oh my gosh. And he says, Rey. And then they start shooting the stuff to make the EVA unit stop it. It's still going. So it had a consciousness, or they established that there was still the power backup, so it had like 35 seconds or a minute left. So it either had a consciousness or the power just had not ran out yet. So maybe it's not it. Maybe I'm thinking it has a consciousness when it doesn't. But the fact that it goes berserk and still has movement and acts, because this is the thing that makes me think it has consciousness. It still moves around and has motor functions when the pilot's not in it. Because I thought that, okay, we've got these organic creatures, maybe with the Evangelion armor over it, and the pilots get injected into the brain of it, essentially, into the spinal cord, into the nape, to get into the brain, and then it controls it from there. It becomes like the human pilots, Rey and Shinji, are like microchips that are attached into the brain of these EVAs, and they control it from within. That's what it seemed like. But the fact that it can still move around without the pilots is a bit disturbing. A bit disturbing indeed. But Gendo, he burns his hand, knocks off the glasses, but he burns his hand to get in there to get her out. And Akagi notices and watches him do it and says, Rey, are you all right? And then she says, yes. And his glasses, they broke in that moment. Oh my gosh. Rey beyond the heart. And the other one was Rey 1 or Rey I, whichever way, but Rey beyond the heart. So Gendo has a clear affinity for Rey. Now, I don't know how to take this because Rey has an affinity for Gendo. Now, how these two view each other, the safe assumption, is that Rey looks up to Gendo maybe like a parent, because he basically burned his hands. He burned his hands and ran to save Rey. So maybe the safe assumption is that Rey views Gendo as a father figure or as her hero. What we don't know for sure is whether or not Rey has a romantic attachment to Gendo, which sounds creepy because it is. But with this show, I'm not going to put it past it, especially with how sexual things get in this show. And it's a coming of age story. It's talking about puberty, things like that. Does Rey, that's my big question, does Rey have a crush on Gendo? Her hero. And you would be thinking, well, she's a 14-year-old girl. He's like in his 30s or 40s. Why would she be crushing on him? But it happens. You hear all the time about high school kids that have crushes on their teachers, things like that. Like, it's just, it happens. So am I ruling it out? No. Does it creep me out? Yes. Especially from his perspective. Now, does Gendo view her as a daughter? I think so. I like to think, but I don't think that Gendo views Rey in any type of romantic way at all. I think he views her like the daughter he never had. Oh, here's this girl that knows my vision and believes in saving the world. She's all gung-ho. She's the gung-ho protagonist that will. So I can depend on her. My kid over here doesn't want to do anything, so he's just a good for nothing. We'll just throw him to the curb and I'll just latch on to Rey. I think that Gendo views Rey as like a daughter. There's like a father-daughter dynamic there, and that he does anything to help her. Now, whether Rey views him as a father figure alone or has a crush on him, I don't know. Because she's just kind of like, But she definitely views him like, she puts him high up on a pedestal in her mind, which is interesting. So, well, I don't know yet. I guess we'll find out with her character where it ends up going. But, God, and then they're busting out Rei Ayanami, the first test subject chosen in accordance with the Marduk report. The first child. The firstborn, right? So she is the first child. Okay. So she's the first child, but they established that Shinji was the third child. Where's the second? So that's going to be one of my questions on here is, where is the second child? Because they said they're looking for a fourth child. I'm going to put that here. They said they were looking for a fourth child. So I assumed that the fourth child was the redhead that they're looking for. And she's going to come into the fray at some point in this series. I thought she'd already be here. But they're looking for her. But if that's the case, then who's the second child? So either the redhead is the second child that's been gone for reasons, or she's the fourth child that we haven't met yet. But if that's the case, then what happened to the second child? I don't want to be spoiled, so I don't want to know yet, but that's just questions that I'm wondering. Okay. But she was the first. She's the designated pilot for Evangelion Prototype Unit 00. So that makes me think, though, that the second child was the original pilot for the 01 unit, and then the fourth child is going to be the pilot for the 02 unit. Because I said back in episode 1, her uniform has like a 02 on it. So something happened to the second child. The second child is either dead, or it didn't work out, or they left. Something has happened that the second child's not there. We don't know what yet, though. But they say her past has been eradicated and all her personal records were erased. So she has no backstory. How convenient. Where'd she come from? We don't know. This girl with red eyes and periwinkle hair. That doesn't look like any of the other characters. And so, yeah, and you see, I love the close-up of the EVA unit's hand. It's cool. So what caused the accident during the last experiment? We still don't know. So we don't know why Rey had a freak out. But it says, however, we believe that mental instability on the part of the pilot was a primary cause. So Rey possibly has some mental instability. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that with her apartment when we get to it. Because there is something there. I do think Rey is dealing with some mental instability. I said in the reaction, I can't imagine why these 14-year-olds that are injected into the nape of these monsters to go fight other monsters would possibly have any type of mental damage. I can't imagine that happening at all. But then we get this, like on top of the Eva, there's this giant cross thing. It's like the most symbolic, obvious metaphor, but here we are. Interesting. And they question it. They're like, oh, mental instability in Rey? I guess because she's quiet. Yes, her mind became much more disturbed than we anticipated. So what happened? I don't know. Could it be? Did something occur to you? No, that can't be it. We don't know what that is. I hate that when shows do that, when they're like, could it be? And then they don't ever answer the question. You're like, what is it, Akagi? Tell us. And we're not going to find the answer yet. So something happened to Rey in the moment that caused the EVA unit to freak out. And I'm glad we get confirmation that Rey's injuries are not caused by an angel necessarily, but by just the ejection of her from the nape. Okay. So then we cut to where the angel landed, like assumingly during the battle of Shinji back in episode 3, there's like the white outline of the angel, like this the chalk outline. It's great. But yeah, it's the most cartoonish looking thing, but it's accurate. But they recovered the angel from Shinji's battle to go and experiment. And it's kind of adorable that Shinji has the little hard hat. He has like the little hard hat on, and he looks like a kid. He looks like a child, right? Even though Shinji's 14, this episode shows just how innocent Shinji is. He's very innocent. And so that line, so this is our enemy. I'm talking about the angels. Okay. I also want to make a little side note here that Misato, it is brought up by Akagi that Misato is like Shinji. And we'll talk about how when we get to that dinner scene. But Misato is like Shinji. And I feel like that's where Misato gets a connection to Shinji and where she kind of plays like this mentor role because she sees a lot of herself in him. I feel like Misato sees Shinji in herself, sees herself in Shinji, and she wants to kind of take him under her wing to help him. And I feel like Gendo, they make a comment that Rey is like Gendo, so Gendo kind of takes Rey under his wing because he sees himself in her. So you have these two adults, Gendo and Misato, who take on each of these kids kind of as their own. So I'm curious if this red-haired girl comes in, is like Akagi going to take her under her wing? She looks kind of wild. I don't know how that's going to work, but then Akagi's kind of wild too, so maybe. For the record, I also love Misato's design in this episode, where she has like the black shirt with the hazmat suit and stuff on it. I like that look. And so then Akagi says, most everything except the core remains intact. It's an ideal sample. And she's like, oh, thanks. Thanks for getting me this ideal sample. And Misato's like, did you find anything new? Like, these two are so girlfriends. I ship Misato and Akagi like so hard. They're literal girlfriends at this point. And so they try to find any information from the angel, but they get the code number 601. And the code number 601 says it cannot be analyzed. So they can't, because the core is destroyed, which the core being destroyed is how they incapacitate them, so it's kind of hard to get around that. They can't really... And I like, she's like, what do you mean? Do you know what the heck it is? Correct. We do know the angel is composed of a type of matter that characterized by both particulate and wave properties like light. Okay, so the angels themselves, the angels are composed, all right, it says they're composed by particles and waves like light and wave particles. Okay. But they just don't know enough because they can't analyze the data. And I love this. I love when she picks up the cup and they all just take a drink at the same time. It's kind of hilarious and really cute. And she says, you've at least found its power source, haven't you? And she says something like that. But we haven't been able to figure out any of its operating principles. So, and then Masato's like, I guess there's a whole world of things we don't know about yet. So they've not found the power source, but they're learning how it operates. Okay. It's fascinating. All right. And old Shinji with his little hard hat. It's so cute. But yeah. And Akagi saying the world is filled with mysteries. For example, take a look at this. And this is the weird thing. This is the angel's inherent wave pattern. And I like that Misato's like pushing Shinji out of the way. I want to see. Pattern blue. And saying, although they are composed of a different form of matter, their actual composition in terms of the arrangement and spacing of the pattern falls within 99.89% of human genetics. So it is basically 99.89% human in its composition or its pattern. So its form is different, but the way that it's structured is nearly like a human's. So again, I think that when that meteorite crashed, I feel like the meteorite crashed and these angels are a mutation of human life that was up there. Like there's some scientists up in the Antarctic poles. Some scientists got hit by this meteor, this radiation, whatever. They mutated into these angels. Their form changed. They said the meteorite was coming down at the speed of light, so it probably hit them and like some kind of weird nuclear stuff happened and they just evolved from this. Like it just sounds, it's interesting, okay? So that's curious. But, okay. And then we see some nerve people walk by. It really shows us how limited our level of understanding is. And it's funny. So here's the thing. Fuku-chan and Gendo walk by. They walk by the room that Misato and Shinji and Akagi are in. Don't even stop. Don't even look over. There's your kid. Doesn't even recognize him. But they're pulling down the core and saying that's good, stop. And so Gendo says this is the core. How's the rest of it? It's pretty deteriorated. We can't expect to use it as a reference. And Shinji watching him. And that's when Shinji notices the hands. That's not a problem. Dispose of the remnants. That he has the burns. And so I like that Misato has gotten pretty good at reading Shinji. Misato can catch on when Shinji is feeling a certain way or doing something, because Shinji's like, oh, nothing's wrong, and she's like, wow, really? The way you just acted and the way you just looked. I love that this series calls it out. Like, it calls out what would normally, because, you usually have a character like glance away, like, no, it's fine, and glance away mysteriously, and in this, Misato calls it out completely. She's like, quit looking like that. I love that Misato says, are you aware that when you say nothing that way, but it's the same as asking others to pay attention to you? And Shinji's like, no, I didn't realize that. And he's like, fine. He's like, my father seemed to have burns on his hands, and so I wanted to figure out what was up. And Misato doesn't seem to know how this happened, because Misato wasn't there during the test experiment. And Misato was like, huh? What's going on? And then Akagi says, oh, it was right before you arrived at Nerve. The 00 unit went berserk during activation, and you heard about that, right? And he's like, yeah, I heard. The pilot was trapped inside. And Akagi recounts what she realized, and he's like, oh, you mean Rey, the pilot? And she's like, yes, Commander Ikari rescued her. And he opened the superheated hatch with his bare hands. And Shinji's like, my father did that? And then, yeah, he's like, that's how he burned his hands. Uh-huh. So, in Shinji's mind, Shinji's like, wait, this guy who's abandoned me for how many years, who shows no semblance of love or support towards me as his own son, opened up a hatch and burned his hands to save this random girl? What? And I know she's not random. I know Rey isn't random. But in Shinji's mind, he's like, wait, why was he so willing to risk his life to save her when he shows me no love at all? It's like, so we cut to the scene of the swimming pool, and they're all the girls are hanging around, swimming, everything, except for Rey. Rey is off by herself. And so I feel like Shinji and Rey, they have a lot in common. They have a lot in common in that they're both very introverted. And he notes how Rey is alone. And that's how Shinji was at the beginning. Before Shinji made friends with Toji and Ida, he was alone. And he acted very similar to how Rey is acting in this episode. So I feel like he wants to connect to her. He's like, you seem like me, Rey. Why does my dad like you and not me? It's interesting as he goes and finds her. And then there's all the guys playing basketball except the ones that are up against the wall. And here's the thing. All the guys, it's funny. The guys are all looking up at the girls. And the girls are like perverts. They're looking at us. But they don't move away. They don't leave. They stay there. And so, of course, these teenage boys, they're talking about all the girls. And they're like, oh, Suzuhara's ogling us. Gross. They're like, hi, Shinji. I like that they call Toji gross. They're like, he's ogling us. But because Shinji is innocent, and because he doesn't do that, the girls are all like, oh, hey, Shinji, how's it going? Like, they all recognize Shinji because he's innocent. They know they can say hi to him. And Toji's like, hey, Chief. I like that he calls him Chief. He's like, what are you looking at so intently? And he's like, I don't know. And so Ida has figured it out, right? I'm going to put Ida up here. Ida notices that Shinji is looking at Rey. He knows what's up. Ida is our he's our observer. He's the guy that catches up on these things. And Shinji's like, no, that's not it. And he's like, oh, come on, that's suspicious. And so then Toji and him give him a really hard time. They're like, oh, are you looking at her boobs? Are you looking at her thighs? Their calves? I love that it's their calves that get him. I'm like, when did girls' calves become something to look at? I clearly am not a middle school boy. But yeah, Shinji's like, no, it's nothing like that. Then what were you looking at? And he's like, you can't fool me. And Shinji's response, he's like, I was just wondering why she's always alone. And they're like, oh, well, that's boring. They're like, come to think of it. They just kind of collapse. She hasn't had any friends since she started here in the 7th grade. There's something about her that makes her hard to approach. So Rey, we establish, is hard to approach. Right? You could argue that Shinji has kind of like an allure to him, like an innocent, naive charm to him, because that's kind of why Toji and Ida, they beat the snot out of him the first time they meet him, but that's why they go back to him later. They're like, there's something mysterious about you, Shinji. We want to get to know you. But Rey kind of has that hard to approach vibe to her, where it's like, eh. And they said 7th grade. If you're 14, usually you're a first year. So, or at least in the United States, you're a freshman if you're 14. So for the last couple of years she's been there. So she's been there probably, she's been at Nerve since she was probably 12. Okay. Probably around that time, because that's when they said she started coming there to school. Okay. But maybe she's probably just got a lousy personality. And I don't know if that's it. She's hard to read, Rey is. But I don't know if it's that she's got a lousy personality. She's just very shy. Kind of like how Shinji was until he made friends. Right? But yeah, Shinji being the innocent boy. And then Ida makes the note. He's like, you guys are EVA pilots. You should get to know her, right? And Shinji's like, yeah, I've hardly spoken to her. And then I love that transition to the EVA unit. He says he's hardly spoken to her. Because, yeah, that is... Shinji's been going through his own rough patch. So, it's only been a month since, around the time he showed up. So he's been dealing with other things. But he has noticed, he's like, we're both pilots. We should probably become friends. We'll probably have to work together at some point. Right? But we have the two EVA units next to each other. And we go through all this, system garbage, this jargon. And so they talk about the synchronization and the numerical conditions. And then, okay, so here's the thing. They show Shinji's watching Rey get into the EVA unit, right? Transmit the results to Balthazar, whatever Balthazar is. And that's when Gendo shows up. And so they say transmit the full range of entry plugs personnel data to Melchoir. I don't know what Melchoir is either. We're getting all this. While this is going on, it's very much it's that behind the scenes, don't worry, don't pay attention to this, where they're giving us information as another thing is going on. This series loves to do this. But she instantly perks up when she sees Gendo. And Shinji zooms in on her. And her body language. This is the part of me that thinks that maybe Rey has a crush on Gendo because her body language, as a girl, as a 14-year-old girl, she jumps up and she's like, oh, hey, this little demure kind of stance. It's not how she stood or acted around other people. And she even does this and this. And she looks like a totally different person. A totally different person when she's talking to him. She's smiling. She looks cheerful. And Shinji's like, wait, what? And he's smiling back at her. And Shinji's like, what is this nonsense? Shinji is he is floored. He's floored at the relationship with his dad and Rey. And I don't blame Shinji for being jealous or being surprised, because all Shinji has known his whole life is that his dad's been a prick to him and has not been kind to him whatsoever. And now he sees someone his own age that his father is not only smiling at, but talking to, but approached her, right? Because Gendo has not gone out of his way at all to interact with Shinji. No, he's not gone out of his way to do that at all. He has gone out of his way to go find Rey and to go watch over her and to check on her, but hasn't done that at all. And so I don't blame Shinji just being and seeing how happy his dad and how natural he seems. It's what? Okay, and she just seems to be a totally different person around him. And Shinji just collapsed back in the seat the fudge is this? I don't blame him. It's he's what the hell? So then we have Misato inviting Akagi over. And there's curry made. We find out that Misato made the curry, and that's why it's not good. And so they have this spread, and it's all, again, there's rice in the bowls, but then it's all just TV dinners and beer. I kind of love Misato's character because of how consistent she is. Because she has the instant ramen, and she wants to put the curry on top of it, and Akagi and Shinji are just oh my god, ew. Are you serious? And she's like, don't you know how good this is? And Akagi's like, you are not a cook. I relate to Misato on a lot of levels, and the whole cooking thing is probably what I relate most to her about. Mm-hmm. I get the Usagi reference too, the Sailor Moon thing. It's great. Right. I've also been told that Shinji's voice actress that plays Shinji's voice is also the voice actress for Sailor Uranus. I'm like, that's great. Love it. Sailor Uranus. And of course they're like, I love that Kagi's like, Misato cooked this, didn't it? It tastes like it. How can she make something ready to eat taste so awful? It's amazing. I love the humor in this show. When it decides to be humorous, it's really good. Like Pin goes and has like the curry in his little bowl. I like they gave the penguin a beer. What? Like they didn't even pop it for him. They assume he's just gonna take his beak and nip it open. They just gave him malt beer and that's it. And then the penguin just. And I like that the animation, because 90s, the animation of inside the EVA unit is what Pin like sees and like, unless that's some kind of secret foreshadowing that Pin is like related to the Evas or angels somehow. If that's the case, that's gonna be amazing. And then Shinji's like, what the hell happened to the penguin? And I like that Kagi's like, Shinji, you really ought to move out. Like, get away. Don't let one bad roommate ruin your life. And here's the thing, though. Shinji's like, oh, I'm used to it now. I like that Shinji is used. He is used to Misato's antics. And here's the thing. Misato does not want Shinji to leave because her apartment has never looked better and she's got Shinji to go get her stuff and clean the place up. She doesn't want him to go, right? Never underestimate the ability of the human to adapt to its environment. Interesting. I like that line. That's interesting. Like, don't underestimate the human ability to adapt. Which we're seeing that kind of be challenged with Rey and Shinji. So, interesting. And so the red tape would be a pain. Like, it'd be too much trouble. He just got his permanent security card. And that's when Akagi's like, oh yeah, I forgot. Like, can you take this to Rey? I keep forgetting to give her new security card. You're a high school student with her. Can you do it? And at first Shinji's like, oh, okay. He seems a little hesitant about it. And of course, Misato's like, what's up? Like, go ahead, Shinji. What's your deal? I love she's drinking the thing. And she's like, what are you doing? Because he's looking at it. And just like Toji and Ida, they assume that Shinji likes Rey. They assume that he has a crush on her. And like, what's the matter? You're staring at her picture. And he's like, oh, no, it's nothing. And they're like, oh, Shinji, don't tell me. And he's like, no. And that's not it, though. Shinji doesn't have a crush on her. He's more jealous of her and mad that she has a relationship with his dad more than anything. It's not a crush. Shinji is trying to understand why his father would have a relationship with her that he doesn't have with his own son. Shinji's just trying to wrap his brain around what makes Rey so special. And everybody else around Shinji is assuming that it's like this sexual awakening in Shinji, that he has a crush on her. And he's like, no, that's not it at all. And we definitely see that's not it in the apartment scene. And he's like, you have an excuse to go see her. Now's your chance. I love the animation where he goes and just sits down. I love his little frustrated. It's such like it's a very teenage boy response. Like, he's just like, fine, just leave me alone. Like, it's so cute. The way that it's animated was adorable. And he's like, stop teasing me. And she says, but I love teasing you. You always take it so seriously. And I honestly, I relate to Misato a lot. I have a friend from high school that we teased her a lot in high school. And it was never to be mean, but we would do things like this and like just poke. And she'd be like, quit it. And we're like, but you take it so seriously. It's one of those things where that type of person, they can take it. Like she could take it. Like, even though we tease her, she'd be like, you guys are the worst. And we'd be like, ah. But she could handle it. And her reactions were always really funny because she would take it so seriously. She was a lot like Shinji in this moment. And we were never mean to her or anything, and she took it really good. But it reminds me a lot of that. Just like Misato. And that's when Akagi says that Shinji is just like Misato. So I'm like, He's like, I find it strange that I know so little about Ayanami, even though we're both EVA pilots. And Akagi says she's a nice girl, but she's like your father. And so they say that she's nice, but like Gendo. And here's the thing. Akagi, like, what a backhanded compliment. Akagi's like, oh, she's nice, but she's like your father. Meaning, your father's not nice. I like that she doesn't say she's nice like your father. She's nice and like your father. She says she's a nice girl, but she's like your father. And then this line saying she's not very adept. And he's like, adept at what? Living. Ooh, I got chills. Just like, not adept at living. Huh. And it's like, just doesn't know how to live properly, doesn't know how to enjoy life, doesn't know the meaning of life and the purpose of it, just isn't very adept at doing day-to-day functions. And that might tie to that mental instability, because if Akagi's like, she kind of struggles like your dad to just do simple day-to-day tasks. Like Gendo seems like he's like a savant where he's like this mad scientist, but isn't quite. It's like Gendo is a mad scientist, can do all these great things with all this technology, but he can't have a conversation with his own son. Like that sort of thing. Like he can do all these things, but socially he's extremely inept and he can't have a decent conversation with his kid. Nor does he seem to want to. But that break was great. So yeah, Rey 1. Which makes me think that maybe there's going to be a Rey 2, like more episodes about Rey. So we go to where Rey lives, which is not like Misato and Shinji. Here's the thing. Misato's apartment was a mess. Misato was a slob. Her place was a mess, and she just moved in, so nothing was organized. Everything was nasty. But the facility that it was in was very nice. Like, it was a very nice facility. Like, it looked clean. It was very, had a nice exterior. It looked like it had been taken care of. This is a dump. So my question is, does Gendo know she's living in this dump? Does Gendo know where Rey lives? Because she's a 14-year-old kid and she looks like she's like out in a ghost town. And it's like the door's busted in. And it's just like the stairwell's nasty and missing doors. And it's room 402 Ayanami. And Shinji's just like, and there's just bottles everywhere. Like, what the hell? He's like, what is this? And he goes to press the little pin palm, the little intercom system. There's no answer to the doorbell. And so he's like, okay, well, maybe I'll just go in. And let's talk about the state of her place. So there's mail like stuck in the box overflowing. Like there's mail stuck in the box overflowing. It's just like she hasn't checked her mail to the point where it's just overflowing everywhere. And so Shinji's like, okay. And there's like holes in the wall. And so there's all these letters and things that she doesn't have. And then does not take shoes off. Okay. Does not take shoes off at the door, which is, primary Japanese custom. But you see like all the dirty, like not just not taking the shoes off, but like her feet are dirty and she just traipses on into the house like she doesn't care. Okay. And he's like, it's me, it's Akari. Like he doesn't say it's Shinji. He's like, we're not on a first name basis, you and I. He's like, I'm coming in, Ayanami. And then he notices, he's like, ugh. And again, Shinji is polite and knows social convention, right? He's a rule follower. Shinji is a rule follower, or at least has been built up to be that if you tell him to do something, he will obey without question, right? And that kind of matches Shinji's character. Rey's character does not care. She seems extremely apathetic, like of societal convention, like don't care. But he takes his shoes off and like tiptoes across there. There are dishes piled up in there's dishes piled up in the sink. Okay. There are dishes piled up, and then he goes to her bedroom. Because, it's a small apartment, not a lot of room. And there's cobwebs. It looks like, this is the part that is disturbing, okay? This is the part where I was like, oh wait, what? Because, yeah, there's dishes piled up, there are cobwebs. The pillowcase that has the blood stains on it. And the trash bin of bloody bandages. I'm sorry, what? And her clothes are just laid out in a nice, neat, orderly fashion. There's her shoes. There's a box. And there's a lamp there. But, okay, so there's something, there's just a mini fridge. So all there is like, there is a mini fridge that's plugged in. There is like a bag for trash and it's overflowing. There are gauze strips and there's gauze there. So there's like a first aid. and trash. Oh my God. And Shinji's like, oh. And then above, like hanging above her bed, above the bloody pillowcase is a little carousel thing, like to hang clothes up, and it's just like all her socks. And there's a chair in the middle of the room, creepily enough, and then there's like all her underwear and stuff in the drawer. And he's just looking around like, what is this? Because Shinji is minimalist. We've established in the last couple episodes, like when he left, Shinji is minimalist, but he's very neat and orderly. Like Shinji keeps his stuff all in a nice, neat formation. This is just like, it's neat, but it's not taken care of, right? There's a lack of humanity to it, honestly. Because like, why would you sleep on a bloody pillow over and over again? And then he sees the desk. And there are several books. There are several books with bookmarks. Okay? There are several books, and then there are Gendo's broken glasses. Like her souvenir. Her souvenir from that day that he saved her. Yeah, the cracked glasses. And I was like, Shinji's gonna put those on and look like his dad, and she's gonna have a reaction to it. And she does. She gets pissed off because those are her special glasses, and because he has the glasses on, he can't see properly. And then she's just out of the shower, standing there looking at him, and he's like, "Oh shit, no!" He's like, "Well, I'm sorry, I entered your," and you could tell that he's like. And you can tell he's like, I didn't mean to do this. I'm sorry. He's like, I didn't mean to barge in. You didn't answer the door. Like Shinji is trying to find an excuse. And she gets mad. She goes to grab the glasses. But Shinji falls backwards in doing so. And he tries to like overcorrect. And in overcorrecting, he falls onto her. And she holds her hand up to protect the glasses. She holds her hand up to save the glasses. They're that important to her. And his bag catches the drawer of the dresser that has all the underwear in it, and it all just goes flying. It is the worst possible scenario for a teenage boy to face. It is the worst possible scenario. Is Shinji like falling on top of this naked girl and her underwear all over him, and it just being the worst, and he doesn't even really know her. Like, okay. But we have this like beaker of water that she drinks out of, and there's like different medication. There's 2 prescriptions. There's like a prescription pill there and another one. So she has medication. Now, I don't know if that medication, we don't know if the medication is for her injuries or if it is something to help with like mental instability for her. We don't know that. But she's clearly like the whole thing of not being adept at living. Like this whole thing here, it's clinical, but it's dirty. It's weird. Like it has a clinicalness to it of like, it doesn't feel like a lived in space. It's like she just goes here, sleeps, and leaves. And she just does things by the books. But there's just like a grunginess to it that's unsettling. It's very unsettling. But yeah, oh Shinji. Oh honey. And he's like right over the top of her with all the underwear. And there's like the rainbow and everything. The rainbow off the glass. And he's looking into her eyes. And she has the glasses held up above her. And they're just looking at each other's faces and the towels all about her. Poor Shinji. He's like, I'm sorry. He's like, this is the most awkward thing. And then it gets even more. She's like, do you mind moving? And he's like, oh yeah. And then he realizes that he'd grabbed her boob. And it was like, ugh. And she's not fazed by it. She's just like, ugh. She's like, great. And he's like, I'm so sorry. And she's like a robot. She gets up and looks at him, and he's like, and he like has his hand where he like had felt her up and was like, and he's just like, I don't know what to do. And she just gets dressed in front of him. And he like decides like, oh, well, she goes, what is it? And he's like, oh, I don't want to look. He's like, I mean, but he's a 14-year-old boy. So he looks back again. And he's like, I was asking. He tries to explain himself. He tries to explain what he was sent to do. And he's like, the card, I was supposed to give you a card. It's been renewed. And I was asked to deliver it. But he's a 14-year-old kid that just had this really awkward situation. And he tries to apologize and says, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. And she puts the glasses in the case to take with her. And then he said, Miss Risco said she forgot to give it to you. And he's just looking away, and she's like, it's true, I rang your bell, but there was no reply. So I just felt like I had to come in to give it to you, and the door was unlocked. So. And then when he looks back, she's already gone. He's like, wait, what? Like, she didn't even give him the courtesy. She didn't even wait for him to finish. She didn't even, like, wait to hear him out, anything. She just left. She got dressed and left. And he was like, and he was being respectful to her, and then it was like, okay. And so then he goes and he starts chasing her like a lost puppy chasing after her. And it's so crazy. I also want to note real quick, there is an extra, like if you see in the streets, it's right around 16 minutes and 52 seconds. There is a guy walking by that looks like Kuwabara from Yu Yu Hakusho. He like has the red pompadour. He looks like Kuwabara. That's amazing. But yeah, and then they're on the train and they're in totally separate benches. They're not near each other. So it's like Shinji is giving Rey her space because he's like, well, this was really awkward. So Shinji is trying to be respectful. He's trying to be respectful to Rey and give her space. But then they get to the nerve facility and they say Central Dogma is currently open to the public. They get to the facility and she tries to use the card that doesn't work. And he told her that her card had been renewed. And she, I guess, just ignored him. And then he swiped. I love that she does 2 swipes and he does the correct swipe and gives it to her. And he's like, hey, it's like the smoothest move Shinji's ever done in this show. Where he's like, this is your new card. She asked me to deliver it to you. And he's trying. And she just snaps it away from him. And Shinji's like, I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to be a friend. I'm trying. Shinji has come a long way in 4 episodes, damn it. He's trying to be friendly, darn it. And Rey's having none of it. And again, just like the elevator doors slamming between him and Gendo, the door shuts between him and Rey. And so then they're on the stairs. And I like that before we had in like episode 2 or 3, we had Shinji, or may have even been episode 1, we had Shinji and Misato going up the elevator, talking about him living separate from Gendo. And now we have him coming down the elevator with Rey talking about, wanting to get to know her better. And he says, I'm sorry about earlier. And she's like, about what? And he's like, do you really want me to say it? And he doesn't say anything. I actually really love that. I love that she's like, what about earlier? And he's like, fine. I love it. He's like, you have a reactivation experiment today, don't you? He just changes the subject. Good on you, Shinji. And he says, wouldn't it be great if we were successful this time? He like tries to make conversation with her. And he says, aren't you afraid of getting in the OO unit again? Because, yeah, she got injured. And she's like, why would I be afraid? Why? And Shinji, who's just trying to make conversation, is like, well, I heard you were hurt pretty badly in an earlier experiment. So I was wondering if you were okay about it. So Shinji's just trying to be like, 1, make conversation. And 2, be like, hey, are you okay? Because I wasn't okay. So I'm just trying to check in, as a potential friend. And so then she says, aren't you Commander Ikari's son? Like, she's very clinical about it. And he's like, yeah. Don't you have faith in your own father's work? Don't you believe it'll work since it's his? And he says, of course not. How could I trust him? So that's the thing. I missed that line in the reaction because he's like, he does not trust Gendo. And you can't blame Shinji for not trusting him because his dad's been a prick to him his whole life, seemingly. But Rey, she trusts Gendo. And I see why she slaps him now because Gendo is her savior. He's the one that saved her. And so for Shinji to just outright yell and be like, no, I don't trust him. Why would I? She gets mad at that and has an emotional response and just smacks the tar out of him. And he's like, oh, hey. And she just smacks him. And that's all there is. And then she just turns around from him. And Shinji's like, these girls. But she gets in the suit and everything. Like, presses it, has everything form fit. And they're like, Rey, are you all right? And then she remembers the words that he said to her. And that blush when Hagi's telling the story that the pilot was trapped and Commander Ikari who rescued her. He opened the superheated hatch with his bare hands. I'm like, how did she know the story that Shinji was being told by Akagi? How did she know that story? Unless she heard it unless Akagi told somebody else. Or it's just the narration going over the scene to help give us the audience context that, yeah, Rey not only trusts Gendo, he's like the one who saved her. She loves him. And so, yeah. That's how he burned his hands. I feel like maybe it's just a voiceover. But we have the Evangelion, the prototype, that she's going into the one unit. And then, of course, we have Gendo talking to her. Okay. So, Gendo working with her for the reactivation and him adjusting the glasses, only they're round now. And it works this time. And she has his glasses hanging from the unit. Like, that's like her reminder that he's going to be there to save her. Maybe Gendo to her is like her connection to be stable. Maybe that's the one way she can keep herself mentally stable. It's just the weirdest thing. And now Shinji is watching her intently and Misato notices it. Misato's like, But Shinji, you can tell Shinji like is concerned for her and wants her to be okay and wants this experiment to go well. But so does Misato. But everybody's just kind of concerned, and then it works. Everything's stabilized. And Akagi is on to Gendo. So Akagi knows that he is attached to Rey. Okay. Akagi notices. And I'm sure that I'm wondering if Akagi will bring it up to Gendo, because now that Shinji's been asking about it, Akagi can probably read the writing on the wall and be like, well, you have this really estranged relationship with your son, and your son's found out that you're actually really close to Rey. So is this going to be a problem later? What is this going to mean? But then this like pyramid from hell shows up and says an unidentified flying object is approaching. It may be the fifth angel. And so he says, stop the test. All personnel alert status level 1. And so then Fuka-chan says, you're not going to use the 00 unit? And he's like, she's not ready to fly yet. What's the status of the 01? Like, Gendo does not want to put Rey in harm's way. Even though this test just proved to work. He doesn't want to put Rey in harm's way. But his son going against this unknown flying object, Shinji's got this. He's only barely made it out alive the last 2 times. The first time he faced the angel, he like went berserk and somehow, fought the angel off and won. The last time he fought the angel, he went berserk. Somehow it worked. Let's go for 3. 3 for 3, right? What? But yeah. And then Akagi's like, they'll be ready in 308 seconds. And he's like, engage. And he says, Rey, return now. Like, he doesn't tell her about all the other stuff. Damn. Like, he is willing to put his son through the gauntlet, but not Rey. Huh. Interesting. But yeah, there's this, triangular prism looking thing that does not seem... The weird thing is it doesn't seem like it has the thing that they... the core. The core's not on the outside. I'm assuming it's internally. But they send Shinji to go face it. Okay. And Shinji's like, all right, I'll do it. And Rey watching him. Okay. Introducing, it's ready for launch. And so Misato and then they send it up. But here's the problem. When they send it up, this thing starts to get its laser. It's about to fire its laser. And there's a high energy reaction from inside the target. And Misato's like, well, shit, no. And then, yeah. And it's right when he jumps up. So Shinji's not ready for this. Not prepared at all. And the moment he shows up, Misato's like, dodge it. And Shinji's like, wait, what? And then it fires through. This laser goes through like a skyscraper, melting it in seconds. And fires and hits right into the core of Shinji. And of course, Shinji, we've established they feel whatever the Eva's feeling. So this thing just got impaled by a laser. Of course, Shinji's like, I'm feeling all of that. And the damage control, the spine and everything is... And this imagery of Shinji just like drowning and screaming in pain. What? And... And then, of course, Misato yells out his name, and that's it. That's the episode. Oh. What? Again, the cliffhangers of this show. What the hell? What the hell? So Rey, and it's the weirdest thing. Rey's a 14-year-old girl, but she clearly is detached. She's detached. I thought Shinji was messed up, but Rey is on equal footing. At least Shinji seems like he has himself somewhat put together. He just has moments of mental instability. Rey seems to be like wallowing in it. And her lifeline in all of this apathy and insanity is Gendo. And he's the only thing keeping her anchored. And for Shinji, Gendo, he doesn't trust him at all. He's like, no, I don't trust this guy. He's not been a father to me like my whole life. So this is very curious to see how Gendo treats each of them. I'm curious if we get this third girl involved, like how he's going to treat her. Maybe he's just going to ignore Shinji altogether. I'm like, But I don't know what we're doing now. It's just fired a laser through Shinji. What we're doing? I don't know. But Rey is an interesting character. I'm worried for her. I'm worried for her what this relationship with Gendo is. I don't get good vibes. And the fact that Gendo, I'm like, Gendo, you treat her so well, but you don't see how terrible you're treating your own son, or maybe you do see it. It's like, ugh. And then Misato, I like that Misato is becoming more and more perceptive of Shinji. And it's clear that Misato wants to help Shinji. She cares about him. So she's trying to keep him in check too. But, oh my God, y'all. This episode. Oof. So yeah, that's fun times. I'm really curious to know your comments down below. There's some funky imagery in this chapter, in this episode. Some very interesting thing with Rey and Shinji. Again, this is like a coming of age story, so teenage hormones and everything getting addressed, but fascinating. So I'm curious to know what you all thought as well. Please no spoilers though. I feel like we didn't get a lot of world building in this episode, but it was more along the lines of between Rey and Shinji and developing their lack of a relationship, for better words. But So in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with episode 6 and see if Shinji survives this with Neon Genesis Evangelion. Bye.